The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in May of 1877, carried by a postal clerk who looked at Victoria Whitmore with more pity than she could bear. And she knew without seeing his face that whatever words lay folded inside that envelope would change everything. Victoria sat in the boarding-house parlor, her fingers tracing the raised seal on the paper while Mrs. Henderson, the landlady, cleared her throat nervously. "Shall I read it for you, dear, please?" Victoria's voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She had been blind since birth, 22 years of darkness that she had learned to navigate with grace and determination. But navigating the whispers and sidelong glances of polite Boston society was something else entirely. Mrs. Henderson's voice wavered as she read. "Miss Whitmore, in response to your inquiry regarding matrimonial arrangements, I am a rancher in Montana Territory, outside of Helena. I own 3,000 acres and run cattle. I am 30 years old. I require a wife who can manage a household and does not concern herself overmuch with appearances. If you are still willing, passage will be arranged. Yours, William Quinn." The words were sparse, almost cold, but Victoria heard something else beneath them. He had not mentioned her blindness with alarm or hesitation. He had written back at all, which was more than the 17 other men she had contacted through the matrimonial agency. "It is quite far, Victoria," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "Montana Territory. That is wild country still, and this man, he sounds rather brusque." "He sounds honest," Victoria replied, straightening her shoulders. "When do I leave?" 3 weeks later, Victoria found herself on a train heading west, her fingers clutching the carpetbag that contained everything she owned. The journey from Boston to St. Louis took 2 days, and from there she would travel by stagecoach north to Helena. A widow named Mrs. Caldwell, heading to visit her son in Denver, had agreed to travel alongside her for part of the journey. "You are very brave, my dear Mrs. Caldwell said as the train clattered over the rails. "Going all this way to marry a stranger." "We are all strangers until we are not," Victoria said, though her stomach twisted with anxiety she would not voice. What if William Quinn took one look at her and realized he had made a terrible mistake? What if she could not manage on a ranch, so far from everything she knew? The train stopped in St. Louis for half a day, and Victoria stepped onto the platform with Mrs. Caldwell's hand on her elbow. The air smelled different here, less salt and sea, more earth and river and something she could not name. Possibility, perhaps, or fear. "The stagecoach does not leave until tomorrow morning," Mrs. Caldwell said. "We have lodgings at a hotel near the depot." That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar city, Victoria let herself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from the enormity of what she was doing. She was traveling over 1,000 miles to marry a man who knew she was blind but had not asked a single question about it. A man who owned land she would never see, under skies she could only imagine. But perhaps that was exactly why she had to go. The stagecoach journey from St. Louis north was grueling. Victoria learned to brace herself against the jolting of the wheels, to recognize the sounds that meant they were climbing into higher country, to distinguish the voices of her fellow passengers. There was a merchant heading to Helena with goods to sell, a young couple relocating for the husband's mining work, and a taciturn man who spoke little but moved with the confidence of someone who knew this land. Mrs. Caldwell left them in Denver, pressing a handkerchief into Victoria's hand and whispering, "You have more courage than anyone I have ever met. I hope he deserves you." The last leg of the journey was the longest. The air grew thinner, cooler, and Victoria wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She could hear the driver calling to the horses, the creak of leather and wood, and beneath it all, a vastness that seemed to stretch forever. "First time in Montana?" the merchant asked her. "Yes," Victoria said. "I am to be married." "Well now, congratulations, miss. Who is the lucky fellow?" "William Quinn. He has a ranch outside Helena." There was a pause, and Victoria felt the sudden attention of everyone in the coach. "Quinn," the taciturn man said slowly. "Big fellow. Keeps to himself mostly." "I do not know," Victoria admitted. "We have corresponded but never met." "He is a good man," the man said after a moment. "Fair, does not cheat on his dealings. You could do worse." It was not exactly a glowing recommendation, but something in Victoria's chest loosened slightly. The stagecoach pulled into Helena on a bright afternoon in early June. Victoria could hear the bustle of a growing town, hammers striking nails, voices calling out, wagon wheels on packed dirt. Someone helped her down from the coach, and she stood on the boardwalk with her carpet bag, wondering if William Quinn was already here or if she would have to wait. "Miss Whitmore." The voice was deep, rougher than she had imagined, but not unkind. Victoria turned toward it. "Mr. Quinn." "Yes, madam." He hesitated, and Victoria heard the shuffle of boots on wood. "I have a wagon. The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. I am ready whenever you are." He took her bag, and his hand brushed hers for just a moment. His skin was calloused, warm. "This way, then. Watch your step. There is a plank here, then 3 steps down to the street." He guided her with surprising patience, describing each obstacle before they reached it. The wagon seat was high, and he lifted her up as though she weighed nothing at all. Victoria settled her skirts around her and folded her hands in her lap, acutely aware of the man beside her. The wagon jolted forward, and for a while they rode in silence. Victoria listened to the sounds of town fading behind them, replaced by wind through grass and the distant call of birds she did not recognize. "I should tell you," William said finally, his voice tight. "I am not much to look at." Victoria tilted her head toward him, confused. "Mr. Quinn, I cannot see you at all. Surely you realize that." "I did. That is why I wrote back." He paused, and she heard him take a breath. "I was in a fire 4 years ago trying to save horses from a burning barn, got most of them out, but the roof came down on me, left scars, bad ones. Face, neck, shoulder, arm. People look at me different now, women especially." Understanding washed over Victoria, and with it, a strange sense of relief. "You thought I would be less particular because I cannot see." "I thought you would not flinch when you touched me," he said bluntly. "I thought maybe that would be enough to build something on, not having to see the fear or the pity in your eyes." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. The wagon creaked beneath them, and she could smell wildflowers on the wind. "Then you will never see my scars, only feel my love," she said softly. "Madam." "I have scars too, Mr. Quinn. They are just not visible. People have looked at me with pity my entire life. They speak to me as though I am simple-minded or helpless. They make decisions for me and tell me what I cannot do. I left Boston because I was tired of being invisible, or worse, being seen only as a burden." She turned toward him more fully. "You wrote to me as though I was simply a woman, not a blind woman, not a charity case, just Victoria. I came all this way because I thought perhaps you might see me that way, or rather not see me but know me." The wagon stopped. William's voice was rough when he spoke. "I think we might understand each other, Miss Whitmore." "Victoria, please." "And yes, I think we might." "Then you should call me William, or Will, if you prefer." The ranch house was smaller than Victoria had imagined, but William described it to her as he helped her down from the wagon. 1 story, built of logs with a stone fireplace and 4 rooms. A bedroom, a kitchen, a parlor, and a small room he used for ranch business. There was a porch that wrapped around 2 sides, and behind the house, a barn, a corral, and several other outbuildings. I have a man who helps with the ranch work, William said as he guided her up the porch steps. Name is James. He bunks in the barn. Good worker, does not talk much. You will meet him at supper. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and coffee and something faintly like leather. William led her through each room, letting her trail her fingers along the walls and furniture, learning the layout. The kitchen had a large iron stove, a table with 4 chairs, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. The parlor held a sofa, 2 chairs, and a bookshelf. I am afraid I do not have many books, William said, sounding almost embarrassed, but I can read to you if you like in the evenings. I would like that very much, Victoria said, and I can cook and clean and mend. I am quite capable despite what you might think. I do not doubt it. His hand was still on her elbow, steadying her, and Victoria realized she rather liked it there. The bedroom is through here. I will sleep on the sofa until we are married. I thought we could have the ceremony in town tomorrow if that suits you. There is a preacher and we need a witness, but James can do that. Tomorrow, Victoria repeated. It seemed so soon, and yet what was the point in waiting? She had come here to marry this man. Yes, that will be fine. That night, Victoria lay in William's bed alone, staring up at darkness that looked no different whether her eyes were open or closed. She could hear him moving in the other room, the creak of the sofa as he settled onto it. This man who had been burned trying to save horses, who thought himself unlovable because of scars she would never see. She thought about his voice, the way he had described every step and turn so she would not stumble. The gentle way he had lifted her into the wagon, and the honesty in his words. Not romantic, perhaps, but real in a way that made her chest ache. Sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, William made breakfast. Coffee, bacon, eggs, biscuits. Victoria sat at the table, listening to the sizzle of the pan and the quiet efficiency of his movements. "You did not have to do this," she said. "I could have made breakfast. I know you could have, but it is your first morning here and I thought you might want to rest." He set a plate in front of her and she heard him sit down across the table. "The fork is at 3 o'clock, knife at 9. Coffee cup is straight ahead about 6 inches. Victoria smiled despite herself. "Thank you." They ate in companionable silence, and then William said, "I will hitch up the wagon. We should leave within the hour if we want to be back before dark." The ride into Helena felt different in daylight. Victoria could feel the sun on her face, warm and bright. William pointed out landmarks, describing the mountains in the distance, the way the valley spread out green and gold, the river that wound through it like a silver ribbon. "It sounds beautiful," Victoria said wistfully. "It is. I wish you could see it. Tell me more, please, I want to know everything." So he did. He told her about the ranch, how he had built it from nothing over the past 8 years, how he had come west from Ohio after the war, looking for something he could not name. He told her about the cattle, the hard winters, the drought last summer that nearly broke him. He spoke haltingly at first, as though unused to conversation, but as the miles passed, his words came easier. In turn, Victoria told him about Boston, about her childhood in a house that smelled of roses and furniture polish. About her father, who had died when she was 10, and her mother, who had followed him 5 years later. About the distant cousin who had taken her in out of obligation, and the boarding house where she had lived for the past 3 years, working as a seamstress to pay her keep. "You are a seamstress?" William asked, surprised. "I am. My stitches are as straight as anyone's, perhaps straighter since I rely on feel rather than sight. I made this dress I am wearing." "It is a fine dress," William said, though Victoria suspected he was simply being kind. The dress was serviceable, nothing more. a plain brown calico that would not show dirt. The preacher in Helena was a jovial man named Reverend Thompson, who asked no questions when William explained they wished to be married immediately. James, the ranch hand, was waiting outside the small church, a tall, lanky man who smelled of horses and tobacco. He shook Victoria's hand solemnly and said, "Pleased to meet you, madam. Will is a good man. You will be happy here." The ceremony was brief. Victoria spoke her vows clearly, feeling the weight of them settle over her like a cloak. When William slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands were trembling slightly. The band was simple, smooth, warm from his pocket. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thompson said cheerfully. There was a pause, and then William's hands cupped her face gently. His lips brushed hers, soft and tentative, and Victoria felt a flutter of something she could not quite name. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of something that might become love given time. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Quinn," the Reverend said, and just like that, Victoria was married. They stopped at the general store on the way out of town, and William bought supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt. Fabric for new curtains, which he insisted on even though Victoria protested the expense. A tin of peaches, which he said was to celebrate. On the ride back to the ranch, Victoria felt the ring on her finger, turning it around and around. She was married. She was a rancher's wife in Montana Territory, 1,000 miles from everything she had ever known, and yet she did not feel afraid. She felt instead a curious sense of rightness, as though she had been heading toward this moment her entire life. That night, William made supper while Victoria sat at the table, feeling useless. "Tomorrow I will cook," she said firmly. "You must teach me where everything is, and then I will manage the kitchen." "All right," William agreed. He hesitated, then said, "Victoria, about tonight, we do not have to. That is, I do not expect. Damn, I am saying this badly." Victoria felt her cheeks heat. "We are married now, William." "I know, but I will not rush you. We barely know each other. I thought perhaps we could take our time with things." Relief and disappointment warred in Victoria's chest. "That is very considerate of you. I want you to be comfortable here. I want you to be happy." His voice was earnest, and Victoria found herself smiling. "Then tell me about the cattle. How many do you have? What breed?" So they talked through supper, and afterward William read to her from a book of poetry he had found on the shelf. His voice was deep and steady, and Victoria let herself relax into the sound of it. When he finally said good night and retreated to the bedroom, she lay on the sofa, wrapped in quilts that smelled of cedar and sunshine, and felt more content than she had in years. The days fell into a rhythm. Victoria learned the layout of the house by heart, counting steps from the bedroom to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the porch. William showed her where everything was kept, and she began to cook, to clean, to make the house feel like a home. She washed curtains and hung them to dry in the sunshine, made bread that rose high and golden, mended William's shirts where the seams had pulled loose. William was patient, never hovering but always nearby if she needed help. He described the world outside the windows, told her when the sun was setting, when storm clouds were gathering. He brought her wildflowers and placed them in a jar on the table, describing their colors even though she could not see them. "This one is yellow, bright as butter," he said one evening. "And this one is purple, deep and dark, and these little white ones smell like honey." Victoria touched the petals gently, learning their shapes. "Thank you, William. You are welcome." He cleared his throat. "Victoria, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here, truly?" Victoria set down the flowers and turned toward his voice. "I am." "Are you?" "I am," he said, and there was wonder in his voice as though he had not expected to be. "I was alone for so long, I had forgotten what it was like to have someone to talk to come home to." "I know what you mean." Victoria reached out and William took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. His palm was rough, scarred, and warm, and Victoria held on tight. That night, William asked if he could kiss her goodnight, and Victoria said yes. This kiss was longer, deeper, and when he pulled away, they were both breathing hard. "I think," Victoria said softly, "that you do not need to sleep on the sofa anymore. Are you sure?" "I am sure." William carried her to the bedroom, and that night they became husband and wife in truth. He was gentle, almost reverent, and when Victoria's fingers traced the scars on his face, his neck, his shoulder, she felt him tense. "Do they frighten you?" he asked, his voice tight. "No," Victoria said honestly. "They are just part of you, like my blindness is part of me." "They do not define you, William." He let out a shaky breath and pulled her closer. "I do not know what I did to deserve you. You wrote me back," Victoria said simply. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." Afterward, lying in his arms, Victoria felt a peace she had never known. This man who had been a stranger a week ago now felt like home. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, his arms strong around her. She had come west looking for a new life, and instead, she had found something far more precious. Summer deepened into July, then August. Victoria learned to navigate the ranch yard, knew where the chicken coop was, where the well stood, the path to the barn. James taught her to gather eggs, speaking in his slow, quiet way, and she learned to recognize the different chickens by their sounds. William took her riding, settling her in front of him on his horse so she could feel the powerful muscles bunching and stretching beneath them. He described the landscape as they rode, the rolling hills, the pine forests, the mountains that rose up to the west like jagged teeth. "Someday, I want to take you up into the high country," he said. "There are meadows there full of flowers and streams so cold and clear you can see every stone on the bottom. The air smells like pine and snow, even in summer." "I would like that," Victoria said, leaning back against his chest. One afternoon, William came home from checking the cattle with news. "There is a dance in town next Saturday. I thought perhaps we could go. If you wanted to, that is. I know I am not much of a dancer, but I would love to go," Victoria interrupted. She had not been to a dance since she was a girl, and even then, no one had asked her to dance. But now she was married, respectable, and William was her husband. He would dance with her, even if no one else did. The night of the dance, Victoria wore her best dress, a deep blue that William said matched the Montana sky at dusk. She had washed her hair until it shone, and William helped her pin it up, his fingers surprisingly deft. "You look beautiful," he said softly, and Victoria felt herself blush. The dance was held in a large barn at the edge of town, and the sound of fiddle music spilled out into the warm evening air. William led Victoria inside, his hand firm on her elbow, and suddenly the music stopped. Victoria felt the attention shift toward them, felt the whispers start. "That is Quinn," someone muttered, "and his new wife. They say she is blind. Poor woman. Wonder if she knows what he looks like under those scars." William's hand tightened on her arm, and Victoria felt him start to turn to lead her back outside, but she stopped him. "We are here to dance," she said clearly, loud enough for the room to hear. "And I intend to dance with my husband." The fiddle started up again, tentative at first, then stronger. William led her onto the floor, and she felt his arm come around her waist, his hand take hers. "I am not very good at this," he warned. "Neither am I," Victoria said, and then they were moving, stumbling a bit at first, but then finding the rhythm. William held her close, guiding her through the steps, and Victoria laughed, breathless and happy. Other couples joined them on the floor, and gradually the whispers faded. When the song ended, someone clapped and then others joined in. A woman approached them, her voice kind. "Mrs. Quinn, I am Martha Reeves. My husband owns the mercantile in town. Welcome to Helena." "Thank you," Victoria said, surprised and pleased. Other introductions followed. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone, and while some people were clearly curious about the blind woman who had married the scarred rancher, most were simply friendly. By the end of the evening, Victoria had been invited to 3 church socials and a quilting circle. On the ride home, William was quiet. "Finally," he said, "you did not have to do that. Insist on dancing, I mean. I know people talk." "Let them talk," Victoria said. "I am tired of hiding, William. I spent my whole life being tucked away, kept out of sight because my blindness made people uncomfortable. I will not live that way anymore, and you should not have to either." William pulled the wagon to a stop, and then his arms were around her, holding her tight. "I love you," he said, the words rough and fierce. "God help me, Victoria, I love you." "I love you too," Victoria whispered, and it was true. She had not expected to fall in love with her mail-order husband, but she had. She loved his kindness, his patience, his quiet strength. She loved the way he described the world to her, the way he held her at night, the way he made her feel seen even though she could not see. That night, they made love with a new urgency, a new tenderness. Afterward, William traced her face with his fingers, learning her the way she had learned him. "You are the most beautiful thing in my life," he said. "I thought I would be alone forever. I thought no woman would want a man like me." "I want you," Victoria said fiercely, "scars and all. Just as you want me, blindness and all. We are not perfect, William, but we are perfect for each other." Fall came early in Montana. The air turned crisp, and William spent long days moving the cattle down from the high pastures, preparing for winter. Victoria worked in the kitchen, canning vegetables from the garden, making preserves, baking bread and pies. She learned to churn butter to make soap, to render fat for candles. One morning in late September, Victoria woke feeling queasy. She made it to the basin just in time, and when William heard her retching, he was there immediately, holding her hair back, murmuring soothingly. "I am all right," she managed when the nausea passed. "I think perhaps I ate something that disagreed with me." But the sickness continued for several days, always in the morning, and finally, Victoria realized what it meant. "William," she said one evening as they sat by the fire, "I think I am with child." There was a long silence. Then William was beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Are you sure?" "Not entirely. But all the signs are there. I think the baby will come in the spring." "A baby," William said, his voice full of awe. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Victoria asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy, Victoria, I am terrified and overjoyed, and completely unprepared. But yes, I am happy. So very happy." The winter was long and hard, but Victoria did not mind. She spent her days knitting small garments, sewing tiny gowns and blankets. William hovered over her, constantly worried that she would overexert herself, until Victoria finally snapped at him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "I am having a baby, William, not dying of consumption. I am perfectly capable of cooking supper." I know. I just want you to be careful." "I am always careful." She softened her voice. "But I appreciate your concern. Truly, I do." In February, a blizzard swept through, dumping 3 feet of snow and trapping them in the house for a week. William read to Victoria for hours, and they talked about names for the baby, about the future, about their hopes and dreams. "I want to build a bigger house," William said. "One with more bedrooms for all the children we will have." "All the children," Victoria teased. "How many are you planning?" "As many as you will give me. 6 at least." "We will see about that after I have this one," Victoria said dryly, and William laughed. Spring came slowly, the snow melting in fits and starts. Victoria's belly swelled, and she felt the baby move inside her, tiny flutters at first, then stronger kicks. William would place his hand on her stomach in the evenings, marveling at each movement. "He is going to be strong," he said. "Or she," Victoria reminded him. "It might be a girl." "A girl would be wonderful, with your courage and your beautiful eyes." The baby came in late April, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. William sent James for the midwife in town, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Fletcher, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. "You are doing fine, dear," Mrs. Fletcher said as Victoria panted through another contraction. "Just breathe. It will not be much longer now." William stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. When the baby finally came, a lusty cry filling the room, Victoria wept with relief and joy. "It is a boy," Mrs. Fletcher announced. "A fine, healthy boy." She placed the baby in Victoria's arms, and Victoria cradled him close, her fingers tracing his tiny features. He had William's strong jaw, she thought, and a surprising amount of hair. "What shall we name him?" William asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought perhaps Samuel," Victoria said, "after my father, Samuel Quinn." William tried out the name. "I like it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world, son." The weeks after Samuel's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Victoria learned to nurse him, to change his nappies, to soothe him when he cried. William was endlessly patient, walking the floor with Samuel when Victoria was too exhausted to move, bringing her meals in bed, taking over all the household chores. "You are going to spoil me," Victoria protested weakly. "You just brought our son into the world. You have earned a little spoiling." As spring turned to summer, Samuel grew and thrived. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, and William doted on him shamelessly. Victoria would hear him talking to Samuel as he worked around the ranch, pointing out the horses and cattle, describing the mountains and sky. "He cannot understand you yet," Victoria said, amused. "He will. And when he does, I want him to know how beautiful the world is. How lucky we are to be here." One evening in June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Victoria said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About how far we have come. A year ago I was alone in Boston, convinced I would never marry, never have a family, and now look at us. A husband who loves me, a beautiful son, a home. I am happier than I ever thought possible." William reached for her hand. "I was thinking the same thing. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions, but you brought life back to this place, to me. I did not know I was lonely until I was not lonely anymore. Then you will never see my scars, only feel my love," Victoria said softly, echoing the words she had spoken that first day. "That is still true, William. I do not see your scars. I only feel your love every single day." "And I see you," William said. "Not a blind woman, just Victoria, my wife, the love of my life." Samuel fussed in his cradle, and Victoria rose to tend to him, William following close behind. They stood together, looking down at their son, and Victoria felt a contentment so deep it made her chest ache. This was what she had traveled 1,000 miles to find. Not just a husband or a home, but a family. A place where she belonged, where she was valued for who she was, not pitied for what she could not do. A love that saw past the surface to the heart beneath. 2 years passed in a blink. Samuel grew into a toddler, curious and fearless, and William was constantly pulling him back from some new danger. Victoria learned to manage the ranch household with confidence, and she became friends with the women in town, attending socials and church services, contributing to quilting bees and charity drives. In the fall of 1880, their second child was born, a daughter they named Rose after the flowers William had brought Victoria that first summer. Rose was quieter than Samuel, more contemplative, and Victoria wondered if she had inherited her mother's cautious nature. William expanded the ranch, buying more land, more cattle. He built the bigger house he had promised, with 4 bedrooms and a proper parlor and a kitchen large enough for Victoria to work comfortably. James married a woman from town and moved into his own small cabin on the property, and William hired 2 more hands to help with the growing operation. "You are going to be a cattle baron," Victoria teased one evening as they sat on the porch of the new house, watching the children play in the yard. "I just want to provide for my family," William said. "For you and the children. I want you to have everything you need." "I already have everything I need," Victoria said, leaning against his shoulder. "I have you." Samuel started school in town that fall, riding in with William twice a week and staying with Martha Reeves, who had become a good friend. He came home full of stories about the other children, the things he was learning, the world beyond the ranch. "Mama, did you know that the ocean is bigger than all of Montana?" he asked one evening, his voice full of wonder. "I did know that," Victoria said, smiling. "I lived near the ocean when I was a little girl in Boston." "Will you tell me about it?" So Victoria told him about the sea, the sound of waves crashing on the shore, the smell of salt air. Samuel listened, rapt, and Victoria realized that her children would grow up knowing both her world and William's, blind and sighted, past and present. In the summer of 1882, Victoria found herself pregnant again. This time, the sickness was worse, and she spent weeks feeling miserable. William fretted constantly until Victoria threatened to throw a skillet at him if he did not stop hovering. "I am fine," she insisted. "Just growing another person, that is all." The baby, another boy they named Thomas, arrived in February during a snowstorm. He was small but healthy, with a loud cry that suggested he would not be ignored. Samuel and Rose were fascinated by their new brother, constantly wanting to hold him, touch him, help care for him. "We have 3, William said one night as they lay in bed with Thomas asleep in his cradle beside them. 3 healthy children. How did I get so lucky?" "We got lucky," Victoria corrected. "Both of us, together." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The ranch prospered, and William became known throughout the territory as a fair and honest rancher. Victoria became involved in starting a school for blind children in Helena, traveling to town once a week to teach them the skills she had learned, showing them that blindness did not mean helplessness. Samuel grew tall and strong like his father, taking to ranch work like he was born to it. Rose was quieter, more bookish, and spent hours having William read to her. Thomas was the charmer, always laughing, always getting into mischief. In 1885, when Victoria was 30 years old, their 4th child was born, a daughter they named Lily. She was the easiest baby of them all, content to be held and rocked, smiling at everything and everyone. "I think 4 might be enough," Victoria said breathlessly as she recovered from the birth. "I am not as young as I used to be." "Whatever you want," William agreed. 4 is a good number. "Though I would not complain if you changed your mind." "We will see," Victoria said, though privately she thought she was done with childbearing. 4 children were a blessing, and she wanted to enjoy them, to watch them grow, to be present for all the moments that made up a childhood. Montana became a state in 1889, and Helena celebrated with a huge festival. The Quinn family attended, all 6 of them, and Victoria felt a surge of pride as William walked beside her, Samuel and Rose flanking them, Thomas and Lily holding hands in front. They were a family, solid and strong, built on a foundation of love and trust and mutual respect. People no longer whispered when they saw William's scars or treated Victoria like she was helpless. They were simply the Quinns, well-liked and respected in the community. That night, after the children were asleep, William and Victoria sat on the porch of their house, listening to the sounds of the Montana night. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not written back to me?" Victoria asked. "Every day," William said quietly. "I think about how close I came to spending my life alone, how I almost did not write back at all because I thought no woman would want me, even a blind one. And then I thought, what do I have to lose? The worst she can say is no. The best she can say is yes," Victoria said softly. "The best she can say is yes," William agreed. He pulled her close and they sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the life they had built together. The children grew. Samuel took over more and more of the ranch work, his shoulders broadening, his voice deepening. At 18, he was nearly as tall as William and twice as stubborn. Rose, at 16, was teaching at the school in town, following in her mother's footsteps. Thomas, 14, was still deciding what he wanted to do with his life, torn between ranching and the lure of the wider world. Lily, at 10, was everyone's favorite, sweet and gentle and endlessly patient with her aging parents. Because they were aging, Victoria realized with a start one morning as she looked in the mirror, her fingers tracing the lines that had appeared around her eyes, the silver threading through her hair. She was 45 years old, and William was 53. They were no longer the young couple who had married in that little church in Helena all those years ago, but they were happy. Oh, how they were happy. One evening in the fall of 1895, as they sat by the fire, William suddenly said, "Victoria, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his voice made her set down her knitting. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about the future, about what will happen to the ranch when I am gone. William, you are only 53. You have years ahead of you, perhaps, but I want to make sure everything is settled. I have been talking to a lawyer in town, drawing up a will. The ranch will go to Samuel, but I am making provisions for the other children too. Money for Rose to continue teaching, for Thomas to travel if he wants to for Lily's future. And you will be taken care of always. I have made sure of that." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not want to think about losing you. And I do not want to think about leaving you, but we have to be practical, love. I want you to be secure, no matter what happens." She nodded, unable to speak, and William pulled her close. They sat together as the fire burned low, holding each other, treasuring the warmth and the closeness that had sustained them for nearly 20 years. But William's health remained strong, and the years continued to pass peacefully. Samuel married a girl from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on Quinn land, starting their own family. Rose married a schoolteacher from Helena, a kind man who shared her love of books and learning. Thomas eventually decided to study law, traveling to San Francisco for his education but promising to return. Lily showed no interest in marriage yet, preferring to stay home and help her aging parents. "You should go out, meet young men," Victoria urged her. "I will, Mama, when I am ready. Right now, I am happy here." In 1902, Victoria turned 47 and William surprised her with a trip. "We are going to St. Louis," he announced. "St. Louis? Why?" "Because that is where your journey west began. I thought perhaps you would like to see it again." "Well, experience it again," he amended quickly. "William, that was 25 years ago. I barely remember it. All the more reason to go back. Come on, Victoria. Let us have an adventure, just the two of us. Lily can manage the house and Samuel can handle the ranch." So they went, taking the train east, retracing the journey Victoria had made so long ago. St. Louis was bigger now, busier, but Victoria could still smell the river, still feel the energy of the city. They stayed in a hotel, ate in restaurants, went to the theater. William described everything to her, painting pictures with his words, and Victoria fell in love with him all over again. On their last night in the city, as they walked along the riverfront, William stopped suddenly. "Victoria, do you remember what you said to me that first day? When I told you about my scars, I said you would never see my scars, only feel my love. That is right, and it has been true every day of our marriage. You have loved me without reservation, without flinching, without hesitation. You have given me a life I never dreamed possible. Children, a home, a purpose. You have given me yourself, and that is the greatest gift I have ever received." "William," Victoria said, her voice breaking, "let me finish. I want you to know that you saved me, not just from loneliness, but from bitterness. From believing that I was unlovable because of these scars. You taught me that love is not about what we see, but what we feel, what we choose. And I choose you, Victoria. I have chosen you every day for 25 years, and I will choose you every day for the rest of my life." Victoria could not speak past the lump in her throat. She reached up, finding William's face with her hands, tracing the familiar lines and scars that told the story of his life. And then she kissed him, there on the riverfront in St. Louis, with the same passion and tenderness she had felt on their wedding night. They returned home to Montana, to the ranch and the mountains and the wide sky Victoria could not see but loved anyway. To their children and grandchildren, to the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination, and a mail-order bride advertisement in a Boston newspaper. The years continued to pass, slower now, more precious. William's hair turned white, and Victoria's fingers grew more gnarled with arthritis, but they still sat on the porch every evening, still held hands in the dark, still found comfort in each other's presence. Samuel took over the ranch completely, and William retired, content to advise when asked, but mostly just enjoying his grandchildren, of which there were now 7. Rose had 3 children, Samuel 4, and Thomas had recently sent word that he was engaged to a young woman in San Francisco. "We are going to be great-grandparents soon," Victoria said one evening, marveling at the thought. "We have been blessed beyond measure," William agreed. In the summer of 1910, the entire Quinn family gathered for a reunion. All the children, all the grandchildren, spread out across the ranch property in tents and wagons. There was music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Victoria sat in a chair of honor, feeling the life and love swirling around her, and her heart was full to bursting. Lily, now 35 and finally married to a local rancher, came and sat beside her. "Mama, I was thinking, someone should write down your story, how you came west, how you and Papa met. It is too wonderful to be forgotten. Who would want to read about an old blind woman and a scarred rancher?" Victoria protested. "Everyone," Rose chimed in, joining them. "It is a love story for the ages, Mama. Against all odds, you found each other. You built this family, this legacy. That matters." Victoria thought about it, about the frightened young woman who had boarded a train in Boston with nothing but a carpet bag and a desperate hope, about the lonely rancher who had taken a chance on a blind bride, about all the years in between, the joy and sorrow, the triumphs and trials, the ordinary moments that had made up an extraordinary life. "Perhaps you are right," she said finally. "Perhaps it is a story worth telling, but not yet." First, she wanted to live it, to soak in every remaining moment with the man who had promised her love instead of sight, who had kept that promise for over 30 years. William found her later, as the sun was setting and the party was winding down. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand. He led her away from the house, out into the meadow where the grass grew tall and sweet. The sounds of the party faded behind them, and Victoria could hear crickets singing, the rustle of the wind through the grass, the distant call of a night bird. "Where are we going?" she asked, laughing. "You will see, or rather you will feel. He stopped, and Victoria felt him spread a blanket on the ground. They sat down together, and William pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Look up," he said. "William, I cannot see the stars. I know, but I can describe them to you. There are thousands of them tonight, maybe millions. They spread across the sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. The Milky Way cuts right through the middle, a river of light. And right there, straight above us, that is the North Star. The one that guided me west all those years ago, to the place where I would meet you." Victoria tilted her face up to the sky she could not see, imagining the stars William described. She felt his heartbeat against her side, steady and strong, and she thought about all the miles they had traveled, all the obstacles they had overcome, to end up here together, surrounded by the family they had created. "I love you," she whispered. "I have loved you from the moment you took my hand and helped me down from that stagecoach. I have loved you through every day and every night, through every joy and every sorrow. And I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," William said, his voice rough with emotion. "My brave, beautiful Victoria, my mail-order bride who saw past my scars to the man beneath. You are the love of my life and the greatest adventure I ever had." They sat there in the meadow as the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together through faith and determination and love. Who had proven that sometimes the greatest love stories are not about seeing, but about believing, about choosing each other every day, no matter what. Years later, when Victoria was 72 and William was 80, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. 50 years since that brief ceremony in Helena, since William had slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love her until death parted them. 50 years, Victoria marveled, sitting beside William in the parlor of the ranch house that had been their home for so long. "It seems like a lifetime and like yesterday, all at once." 50 more, William said, and though his voice was weaker now, the love in it was as strong as ever. They both knew it was unlikely. William's health was failing, his heart growing weaker. The doctor had been honest with them both. But Victoria chose to believe anyway, chose to hope for more time, more moments, more days to sit beside the man who had changed her life. When William died, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Victoria beside him. She felt the moment his breathing stopped, felt the stillness settle over him, and she knew he was gone. The grief was crushing, absolute. 53 years of marriage ended in a single moment. Victoria wept until she thought there were no tears left, and then she wept some more. But gradually, the sharp edges of grief softened. She remembered not the ending, but the life they had lived together, the love that had sustained them through hardship and triumph alike, the family they had created, the legacy they had built. She lived for another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, secure in the knowledge that she had been loved beyond measure, that she had loved in return, fully and completely, holding nothing back. And when she died, peacefully in her sleep in the house William had built for her, she went with a smile on her face. She was going to see her husband again, she was certain of it. And this time, perhaps, she would actually be able to see him. To look upon the face she had known only through touch, to see the man who had loved her so well. But even if she could not, even if heaven was as dark as earth had been, it would not matter, because she had spent her life feeling his love, and that had been more than enough. Victoria's children buried her beside William on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under the vast Montana sky. The gravestone was simple, bearing both their names, the dates of their birth and death, and a single line that Samuel had chosen. "Then you will never see my scars, only feel my love." It was the promise they had made to each other and kept for a lifetime. A promise that had changed two lonely people into a family, a ranch into a home, a marriage of convenience into a love story for the ages. And though Victoria and William were gone, their love lived on in the children they had raised, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who bore their names and carried their legacy forward. In the ranch that still operated, passed down through the generations. In the stories that were told on warm summer evenings, of the blind mail-order bride and the scarred rancher who had found each other against all odds, it lived on in the simple truth that love is not about what we see, but what we choose, what we build, what we hold onto through joy and sorrow, through youth and age, through all the days of our lives. And that is the greatest legacy of all. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, and then his sons after him. The house that William built stood strong against Montana winters and blazing summers, sheltering generation after generation of Quinns. The land that William had carved from wilderness remained in the family, protected and cherished, a testament to the work and love of the couple who had started it all. In the town of Helena, Victoria's school for blind children continued, funded by an endowment she had established before her death. Generations of children learned that blindness was not a limitation, but simply a different way of experiencing the world, just as Victoria had shown them. Rose's daughter became a writer and eventually did write down Victoria and William's story, publishing it as a book that touched hearts across the nation. People read about the mail-order bride who could not see and the rancher who thought himself unlovable, and they understood that true love sees with the heart, not the eyes. The story became part of Montana lore, told and retold, embellished and romanticized, but always coming back to the essential truth. That two broken people had found wholeness in each other, that courage and faith and love can overcome any obstacle, that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single letter and a leap of faith. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the Montana grass, and the stars came out in their millions, the descendants of Victoria and William Quinn would sit on the porch of the ranch house and tell the story one more time. About the young woman who traveled 1,000 miles to marry a stranger, about the scarred rancher who took a chance on a blind bride, about the love that grew between them, strong and true and everlasting. They would tell it to their children, and their children would tell it to theirs, and the story would live on, as all great love stories do, inspiring hope and faith and the belief that somewhere out there is someone for everyone. Someone who will see past the scars, past the limitations, past the fears to the heart beneath. Someone who will promise not sight, but something far more precious, love. The kind of love that Victoria and William Quinn had found in each other, built together, and left as a legacy for all who came after. A love that proved, beyond any doubt, that the best things in life cannot be seen with the eyes. They can only be felt with the heart.